Hey YouTube, one of the things I get asked most on my team videos is I don't have XL Medicham, what's my replacement? I don't have Lickitung XL, what's my replacement? And GBL is very candy and dust intensive. Ultra League more than Great League, but Great League as well. So what I'm going to do in this video is go over the top Great League XL Pokemon and Legendary Pokemon, Registeel, Defenseoxys being the main ones, and look at how they play and what you can actually substitute for them. Now, some of these, when I say substitutes, it's very, very, very sort of loose because really there's no substitute for Medicham. There's other options that if you don't have Medicham and you want something similar to it, you can run, but there really is no replacing Medicham in itself. And I'll tell you, let's just start with Medicham right off the bat here. What Medicham's main strength is, I think Medicham has two main strengths. So 20, let's actually optimize stats because level 50 will be important. Actually, mine is level 51, so you should probably maximize it for level 51 against all the other GBL Pokemon. So 26 and 18 record. So on paper, that's not nothing that makes you think like, wow, why is this Pokemon so dominant? It's because one, look at its sort of losses. Jellicent, Cofagrigus, Frostlass. There's some of this, but really there's not a ton of this. So you're already in the 300s. And what makes it so deadly is two things. One is its moveset. So counter, again, one of the best fast moves in the game. Ice Punch and Psychic. So fighting and Psychic typing is very, very interesting typing. And having movesets which cover your sort of weaknesses is also what makes it so strong. So example, one of the main issues was for this Pokemon was Flyers, but Flyers you still have the Ice Punch for, right? Another issue is counter is resisted by poison, but you have Psychic for the poisons. So you really have something to throw at pretty much everything. Combine that with your stat product and having this 140 defense and 143 stamina is huge. So when it's always like if you have over 2,000 stat products in GB in Great League, you're looking good. 2120 is obviously huge. So you have a fighting over 100, and what makes this really strong is this even distribution, because sometimes you get like a super defense heavy Pokemon with little stamina or a very stamina heavy Pokemon with little defense. Having a balance here is actually quite strong. So that's why you kind of see it in this Pokemon. So between its stats and its movesets, it's just very, 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 very tough to deal with. Because again, even like in the bad matchups here, like you're still gonna get an Ice Punch off. In this Sableye matchup, if you are in the zero shield, you'll get, if you're one counter ahead, like use a save swap and you're in the zero shields, let's just run it. So zero shields even here, Sableye should outpace you to the second move, right? So you lose pretty bad, but if you have, I believe it's one counter advantage, you'll get that second Ice Punch off. Nope, sorry, not return. And they go straight foul play. You get that second Ice Punch off before they take you out. And look at that. Sableye, which is one of your hardest counters, is down to 20 HP, right? So that is why Medicham is so strong. It is on 90. It was on 85% of the regional teams. It was on 7 out of the 8 top teams from Pittsburgh. And the other one being Defenseoxys, which is, FYI, one of its substitutes. So Vivo actually has a substitute similar Pokemon here. So what are you looking for in a similar Pokemon? You can play it one of two ways. You can do Defenseoxys is like the exact same, right? So it's not as XL intensive. You can use raid IVs if you have one from a raid or however, right? Like mine's like a 10 or 11 attack, like whatever the base bottom is, right? So you can use Defenseoxys, basically sort of the same. It's bulky, has the same counter move set, has coverage for Flyers and Rock. It's not a fighting, so it doesn't take zero effector from flying. Offset that with your half fighting neutralizes dark, but that won't neutralize dark there. Out of all these Pokemon, I think quite honestly, Poliwrath is the closest here. So Poliwrath, I think Shadow is better. That will be a different video. Shadow versus non-Shadow. But Poliwrath has basically the same sort of moveset and idea, right? It has a counter fast move, Stab. It has an Ice Punch coverage for Flyers. And then you can run with Power Punch, which Medicham also has, where you can ramp up. Or you can run with like a Scald or Dynamic Punch, which is, again, a pretty hard hitting moves, right? So similar typing, right? You trade off being weak to Ghost versus now Grass here, right? So there's your trade-off. There's probably more Ghost in Great League than there is Grass at this point. So not bad. Overall stat product, again, not quite the 2000, a little more attack heavy, a little less on the defense here. So that is your trade-off. So you're never going to replace a level 50.5, 51 Medicham with a level, what's this at? 22, right? Maximize 22. You'll never replace a level 51 Medicham with a 22 Pokemon, but if you need in a pinch, you can use this. Now, again, you're going to lose a lot of bulk, which is going to cost you some matchups. And again, I said right off the bat, I do not think there's a pure replacement for Medicham. I would say if you don't have Medicham, use Defense Deoxys. If you don't have Defense Deoxys and you really want a strong counter user that is also somewhat versatile in this meta, I think it's Poliwrath, right? You get the counter damage, you have coverage move, and then lots of steals in this that you can counter Power Punch, ramp up, and then those Ice Punches will start hurting against your weaknesses and flyers and stuff like that. So that is who I would replace my Medicham with if I did not have Defense Deoxys, or if I didn't have an XL Medicham or Defense Deoxys, that's who I would replace it with. I don't think Scrafty plays, like, there's Scrafty here. I don't think Scrafty really plays the same bill as Medicham. I think that Machamp also lacks, it has coverage move in like a Rock Slide, but I just don't think it has the bulk at all to go with it. Like Poliwrath has a little more bulk, it seems. Hitmonchan, again, it was more, Hitmonchan, same thing. It was more just attack heavy. So Poliwrath gives you a little more bulk compared to these other fighters with the same coverage move. Carbink, I'm going to loop Carbink and Bastiodon into one because they're basically they're not quite the same Pokemon. Carbink is obviously better because it has Moonblast, right? So for your fighters that are going to be where you basically just get walled by Medicham before, you now have a super effective Moonblast. So this Pokemon is quite strong. I mean, I haven't actually used it yet, but from what I know, it's quite strong. Obviously, just getting, when you have a rock type move, this was the same as Bastiodon. You get walled by Stunfisk and Mud Boys and Steals, right? Your main losses, and then everything else you hit okay, except for the stuff like Water and Grass is going to hit super effective against you here. Same with Bastiodon. So those are losses, but outside of that, you just have a ton of bulk where you're going to be able to just, even some weather or Pokemon, like water Pokemon, you're going to be able just to out bulk and out spam here with the Rocks Throw, Rock Slide, and Moonblast. So I'm building mine up currently. I have an XL Bastiodon that some other people use, but Bastiodon has fallen down substantially here. It is now down to number 45, right? Because again, there's no reason to use Bastiodon if you have a Carbink, because Carbink just provides you better overall coverage. And actually, let's look at the let's look at these two stat products beside each other here, right? So similar overall bulk, like well over 2000, but you get a little more attack on Carbink, a little less stamina, but it's basically that Moonblast and that sub fairy typing. So instead of being double weak to like fighting here, you neutralize fighting with the rock, and there's a lot of rock in here. You neutralize fighting, and there's a lot of fighting in here. So replacements. So both of these, I think, offered up, they give you other rock Pokemon, Probopass, Tyranitar, and then other like steel Pokemon like Registeels here, and on Carbink, it's probably somewhat similar. Diancie, Bastiodon, Azumarill, Probopass, Onix, Cresselia, Whimsicott, right? So those aren't realistic similar Pokemon, quite honestly, and I don't think that those are the Pokemon that you should use. If you want, I was actually going to give you a recommendation, but that is XL as well. The problem is if you want like a pure rock throw Pokemon, but I don't think that you actually want a pure rock throw Pokemon. If you truly want a rock throw Pokemon, there's not many rock throw. Why they were meant Probopass is because it's like a steel rock with rocks. Is it a rock? Yeah, steel rock with Rock Slide. Or Smackdown you're gonna get into like, yeah, Celestial, Crustal, stuff like that. I just don't think that if you're using these Pokemon and you're truly just using them for a Smackdown user, there is no substitute. If you're using it because Rock is a nice answer to Flyers, right? And you really want to just go with other Rock type Pokemon, not at Rock. So there's two things that you can do. If you want just a pure Rock answer to Flyers, I think that Regirock is the best one. Just because Regis are sort of broken in this with the lock on, but this has your main Stone Edge move, but also Focus Blast coverage for the steals, right? So you can deal with your Flyers and your steals here. So it's ranked better than Bastiodon just because it can do the same sort of job, quicker to get to Stone Edge. Focus Blast I think is a better coverage move than Flamethrower. Carbink higher just because it's got the XLs with the Moonblast. If it's more of I just want to wall Flyers, then you're going to start looking to steals. And I'm actually just going to go over Registeel next because it's number 3. So if you don't have a Registeel, if you don't have a Bastiodon and you don't have Carbink and you don't have a Registeel and you want to have that same sort of like coverage for Flyers, then I think Galarian Stunfisk is your very, very obvious choice. It is very, very fast charging with the Mud Shot. Rock Slide covers that. Your Steel will resist everything. You are still weak to fighting, but even in those sort of bad fighting matchups against like Medicham, stuff like that, you can do pretty well just going straight Earthquake, right? You usually grab a shield because Medicham in that matchup, if it's running Ice Punch, it can only go counter Ice Punch. And by the time you can actually probably get to 2 Earthquakes. So let's actually check that Zero Shield. Let's check that Zero Shield matchup against Medicham because I'm guessing that you can probably get to multiple Earthquakes before they take you out. Let's confirm that. There's one. You can't. You're just short. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so you're actually a few short. So you're just on the Rock Slide to get some chip damage. But still, like getting Medicham down to 32 is not the worst case scenario when you're in a bad matchup. So that is sort of my one substitute for it. I don't think Steelix is the answer, is the substitute for it. Again, it's a steel, but it doesn't act like a steel. It has completely different movesets. And it's not sort of similar in the rock typing area. It's really, really a different moveset there. So I think realistically, if you don't have Carbink and you don't have a Bastiodon and you don't want to use Registeel, I think Stunfisk is probably one of your only options here. You can try Excadrill. It's just very, 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 very glassy. So there's no reason to use Excadrill if you have Stunfisk. In a pinch, can you use Excadrill? Sure. Like it's very, very spammy, but like giving up that bulk, you're seeing that in that. So I probably would not use it. But if you're in a pinch, sure. So my options would be Carbink 1, Bastiodon 2. I would then go to Registeel as 3, Galarian Stunfisk as 4. And then, quite honestly, if you want another XL option, for me personally, it is no. I'm gonna save that for Lickitung actually, because Lickitung is next on this list at number 4. And again, this is one of those Pokemons where it's like, oh, you really can't replace a Lickitung for what it does. Basically, a very, very again, I'll just maximize these IVs just to get the full picture. 2419, but very, very, very middle distribution. Obviously, anything that resists the lick you're gonna have a really, really tough time against. But outside of that, like even some things that resist lick here, the fact that you're losing to Umbreon resisting lick at 416 is insane. It's just because it has insane bulk, 2300 overall stat product rate, 186 stamina. You feel over that, plus almost 100 attack here, right? So to have that high of stamina with that high with that almost 100 attack is not bad at all. Lick is a great fast move, body slam spam as always, and then power up as nice for what is a ton of water in this meta. So that is why Lickitung is insanely, insanely strong. there is no pure replacement for Lickitung for what it does, right? Because it is weak to fighting, but your main fighters are, like I just mentioned, Medicham, Defense Deoxys, where you actually also do super effective with your licks to them. So those matchups, even though are losses, are not bad losses. So in terms of replacement, one that I was just about to mention for as a substitute for the rocks, which isn't a really, it's kind of more now, is Diggersby. I think Diggersby plays right better here. So there's the recommendations for Lickitung are just a bunch of normal Pokemon. If you want like the purest, like I want the closest thing, if you don't want it the XLs, you can just do Licky. Snorlax also basically has the same sort of moveset except for the Power Whip. It has Lick, has Body Slam, and you can use like an Earthquake or Superpower as a nice coverage second move too, right, for the steals. So Snorlax in a pinch could work. You do feel obviously the bulk lack of XLs. So what you could do is either, and they have so many other options, but these options again aren't as strong against facing Medicham, which it depends what you want to use your Lickitung substitute for. If you're looking just for a pure, if you're looking for a pure, like as close to a substitute as you can, yeah, Munchlax has Lick as well, right? If you're looking for as close to a substitute as you can in terms of moveset and overall compatibility, sort of, it is, I think, Munchlax first, because it runs Tackle, has the main moveset, but it has Lick, right? Just Tackle gets stabbed, so it has Lick and Body Slam spam, and then you can have Bulldoze or Gunk Shot as your second coverage move. So I think Munchlax is realistically the substitute for Lickitung if you don't have it. Snorlax is a much worse version because it just doesn't have the bulk that either of those two have, but you can do that as a substitute. If you're looking for, in terms of a safe swap, that sort of also is somewhat comparable to Lickitung. I think you're now getting into these newer Pokemon. So you can use Double, Greedent, Vigoroth, or Diggersby to a certain extent. The problem is they're just recommending normal Pokemon. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. It does and it doesn't. So Diggersby, let me just go over the pros and cons in each of these Pokemon. Diggersby is the closest in terms of bulk, right, out of all these Pokemon. It is also XL'd, very, very bulky. It now has a little more coverage with Flyers if you run the new Scorching Sands with Hyper Beam, right? Because Mudshot is a very, very fast charging move. So Scorching Sands and then Hyper Beam as a nuke for Flyers. Again, Munchlax doesn't really, I mean, not Munchlax, sorry. Lickitung doesn't cover Flyers. It covers just everything. So having something that covers everything, Mudshot, Scorching Sands, and then like a Hyper Beam for Flyers with its bulk is the most sort of comparable to Lickitung. If you want, in terms of other safe swaps, and why sort of Double is ranked way higher than Diggersby, is because I think Double provides you a little more flexibility with this meta. Again, the problem is it depends what you're seeing in your range. With Double, you will get way more coverage on, and you see this by the middle distribution, like that sort of standard distribution here in the middle. It's a little, it's much worse against, this is what I'm saying. It all depends on what you're covering, if you're covering Medicham or not. Because what makes Lickitung so strong is with the Licks, you are also doing super effective against Medicham, so you lose, but it's like a 415 loss. With a double kick that is resisted, only being able to go Body Slam, you are much, much worse. Where it's better is against, it's going to be against Defense Deoxys. So you lose, but you have at least payback, which can threaten for super effective here. So that's the trade-off with Double, having that double kick. I do think that Double is quite safe. I do think that Diggersby is also quite safe, given that it is the bulk to back it up and now can threaten Hyper Beam. So I think either of those are good options as safe swaps. Greedent, again, I've used Greedent in the Great League now with its new spamming moves. I think it's spamming for sure, but I don't think that it does. I think it lacks the hit that goes with both Double which is funny because it has actually a higher attack stat, but it's just this moveset, right? Which, why is that? Why is Lickitung? Lickitung has a lower attack, but overall higher, like much higher stat product. And then I think it's just the crunch, non-stab crunch, just as a second move, really doesn't do much. And that's the main problem with Greedent, is that the mud shot doesn't do anything. So now you're relying on those body slams, and that's a trade-off with double kick and with Lickitung versus Greedent, in my opinion. Sure, the body slam spam is very, very real. The problem is when you're doing body slam spam with these other two Pokemon, the double kick and lick are actually doing quite a lot of damage in themselves. So as a combined stat, sure, Greedent may get like a second body slam compared to some of these two, but I would take lick and body slam or double kick and body slam like 1.5 over Greedent 2 body slam and no fast move pressure from mud shot sort of thing. And I think that's why I would run double before I'd run Greedent. So I know I talked a lot there. In conclusion, if you don't have Lickitung and you want the purest form of substitute, I think it is Munchlax, and then I think it is Snorlax. I mean, it's Licklicky, right? It is, or Licklicky, but I would actually run Munchlax first, Licklicky second, Snorlax third in terms of pure, like doing the exact same thing. And in terms of these other Pokemon, I would run double first as a main safe swap substitute. I think Diggersby as a second, and then Greedent as a third. Vigoroth can also be used sort of as a substitute, but I think it doesn't have the bulk that these other Pokemon have, which is what you like in Lickitung. Okay, Cress. So Cress has Grass Knot, and people are like, how does Cress have Grass Knot? How do you have Grass Knot? Well, because back in the day, for 7-day research rewards there, you got legendary Pokemon with their moveset, and Cress was one of them. So that is why some of us have Cress with Grass Knot under 1500 CP. So if you don't have Cress, what do you replace it with? Well, Cress plays a very just safe swap coverage bulky role, right? It's just in to absorb damage. Its main thing is it walls Medicham, right? So there's your 677 on Medicham because it can only run Ice Punch here. It can only throw Ice Punch and counters resisted. So you're just going to view Super Fighting like that. It has your Grass move for nice coverage against like Swampert. So it's basically a core breaker for like Swampert, Medicham if people are running that core. And then it just has bulk where you don't have a ton of like wins, but you're basically just sort of using it as like almost a third shield that can potentially grab shields in the opposite direction. But again, Grass Knot kind of needed. Can you run Future Sight Moonblast? Yes, but I just think it makes you much weaker against what is the main meta of water in this league, right? Swampert, Lantern. Like we know those are the main sort of answers, some of the main meta. And then, I mean, you're kind of walled anyways against steals, right? But at least some steals like Galarian Stunfisk. Galarian Stunfisk has half ground. Steelix is half ground. So if you ran Moonblast, Future Sight, you have nothing to throw at those two. The other end of that is if you're in Future Sight Moonblast, you have something to throw at fires like Charizard that you would otherwise not have. So that's in terms of the moveset for Cresselia. What are its substitutes? I haven't even looked at this. Lickitung, yeah, Lickitung is the first thing that came to my mind too, because it plays the exact same role. You're using this as a safe swap to absorb damage and just have an overall sort of balanced sort of distribution here. The other options here, whoops, I see it. Nope. Oh, what's happening here? Oh, sorry. The other options that are recommended here are Wobbuffet, Malamar, Carbink, Medicham, Mewtwo, and Mandibuzz. Yeah, Cress is one of those things that you really, really can't replace. I think I think if you're going to replace Cress, you have to replace it with Lickitung, and then I guess kind of Munchlax. But again, it doesn't play the same role because the main thing is to wall Medicham and deal with Swampert as well, right? That's why you use this Pokemon. So from that perspective, you need to think, what can wall Medicham and deal with Swampert? Out of all these, I think Wobbuffet is probably the closest. I think Mandibuzz is not bad. If I'm looking at sort of other psychic Pokemon, if you want to just go from a psychic standpoint, that's the problem. Psychic is so tough in this, and that's what makes Cress so good. But in terms of like sort of walling Medicham and dealing with Swampert, I would then look to some Ghost, right? Because that is the best answer to that. That can also deal with that. So if you want some Ghost answers, so again, these will never ever replace. They'll never replace Cress, but I think in a pinch, I would not be opposed to. I think I'll go over Sableye in a second because that's probably the next one we need to it. Jellicent is not a terrible option. Again, doesn't replace it. I think Lickitung is your replacement, but if you don't, you can in a pinch use Jellicent as your sort of bulky safe swap that can beat Medicham and has Swampert and beats Swampert usually pretty easy and has general coverage against the main meta. Because although it probably has some hard losses against Darks, which Cress already had some problems against Darks, it otherwise has a pretty like middle distribution as well too. So again, Cress is probably out of all these the trickiest to replace here. But now that we're done Cress, I'm guessing that Sableye is next. And Sableye, off the top of my head, is just going to be Trevenant for sure. But Sableye, what makes it so strong is Shadow Claw, 1. And then having that return to being able just to threaten fairies and stuff in neutral situations is what makes it so strong. And then it's one of the best answers to Medicham. So that is why everyone loves Sableye as a great safe swap. I think they're going to recommend Trevenant because, yeah, Trevenant's number 1, as I would as well. The double Ghost line has been very common in GBL Great League for a very long time. And it's essentially that you try to pull out something with Sableye and then Trevenant would roam free in the back. I think Trevenant works just as well as a safe swap. I think the fact that there's right now, because Noctowl got nerfed into the ground, I think Trevenant is much safer. Because the worst case scenario, you're going to be hit with the other flyers that are like, if you get hit with a Pidgeot or a Noctowl, you're in trouble because you have nothing to throw. But if you get hit with a Charizard or Pelipper, you can still threaten with the Shadow Claw and Shadow Ball, and that's what makes Trevenant so strong. So I think that makes it a great option. Plus, it has the grass to deal with all the waters, and it's like one of the best answers to waters in this league. So and Medicham, right? So being able to cover, you can use it as a replacement to Cress, potentially, because it kind of plays the same role, right? Beats Medicham, beats waters. It doesn't have as much bulk, but it does okay actually. Cofagrigus I think is another interesting one that the only problem with Cofagrigus is this Lickitung has this Sableye has this half dark typing which neutralizes dark, and has the return that can throw moves at other thing. Cofagrigus moveset is Shadow Claw, which is great, Dark Pulse, Shadow Ball. If you get trapped against a normal typing where you can only throw Dark Pulse, or even worse, an Obstagoon, which you can throw absolutely nothing, like the losses on Cofagrigus are going to be very hard, right? 212, 217, 221, right? Because anything that's normal typing that resists your main moveset, you can only throw non-stab Dark Pulse, makes this a very trickier Pokemon to run compared to Sableye, which is much more versatile. Again, I think in a pinch, sure. But again, I would go Sableye first, Trevenant second, Cofagrigus third. Shiftry is really fun if you haven't used it, but it's very glassy. super attack heavy, kind of exact opposite. I know it's similar in the sort of like typing and stuff like that, but in terms of a practicality of using it as a safe swap and just being able to flip matchups and absorb damage, it's much, much worse. Plus, it's not an answer to Medicham like Trevenant and Cofagrigus are. I think in terms of XL, like I'm not going to go over Wobbuffet. Wobbuffet is an XL Pokemon, but it's almost never, ever used. It's used more of like a joke pick. So I'm not even going to bother. I kind of went over Defensive Deoxys because it's just all the other Medicham issues. Azumarill. Azumarill's kind of making a little bit of a comeback. Right? You have Medicham, which you can resist the counters. You have a little less Lantern. Some like Lantern's sort of tricky. But there's less of it. So overall, you're like you have bulk. I think your moveset is what kind of kills you. Like Bubble, they nerfed Bubble a couple seasons ago, and then it's like a non-stab Ice Beam for coverage, right? And I think why it's starting to make a little return is Lantern got nerfed a bit. You're somewhat answer to Medicham. Let's see. I'm assuming, yeah, you're gonna beat Medicham if you just go play rough, right? There. Gligar is starting to show up everywhere, and if you run double super effective, if you're super effective Bubble and double super effective Ice Beam, great answer to Gligar. Steelix, if you're seeing some Steelix in your range, resisting the Dragon Tail and Break and Swipe, plus hitting super effective with the Bubble, right? So it has some Carbink, even running. This is just running Bubble and play rough, right? You're baiting a thing, which is fine, whatever. You can just go play rough neutral there as opposed to baiting that. So a lot of answers to some of the main meta here in Azumarill. So it's making a little bit of a comeback. What can replace its bulk? The typing is the trickiest one. Fairy, water, right? Because when you're using Fairy, your main issue is you're going to get walled by steals. But some of the steals in this you are going to do well against because you have the Bubble. You can run Hydro Pump too if you want. So I'm not going to recommend Carbink or Tapu Fini because those are already tough. I do not agree with Araquanid. They play, although Araquanid is very bulky, I think they play very different roles in terms of what they can beat and not beat. I think out of all this list, I think Toxapex is probably the closest, right? You have very similar bulk. You do have a water move here. And the poison will help you in matchups where the fairy resists, like the fighters, right? So you're resisting fighting because of fairy on Azumarill. You're resisting fighter because of the poison on Toxapex. So I think out of all these Pokemon, Toxapex is probably the closest. Yeah, fairy water. Azumarill's always been like one really tough one too. Other people just use other water Pokemon to replace it. And that's, again, Swampert and Azumarill, completely different Pokemon. I think the closest to Azumarill is probably Jellicent out of all these. Just because it has a little more bulk and sort of, you can run it with Ice Beam too if you want, Jellicent, but Surf, Shadow Ball, just more coverage there. So that is Azumarill. Diggersby. Did I go over Diggersby? I went over what you would replace Diggersby with. Diggersby's main, because it's got Mudshot, Scorching Sands, and now Hyper Beam, basically it's just Galarian Stunfisk, right? Galarian Stunfisk is going to be one of the main G-Fisk. Yeah, right there. That's not surprising. You could also run Quagsire. I think Quagsire is a very, very, very similar Pokemon. Because you have Quagsire, which has Mud Shot. Instead of Scorching Sands, it has Mud Bomb. And instead of a Hyper Beam coverage, Quagsire has Stone Edge. So you replace a fighting weakness. And this has quite a lot. Diggersby has quite a lot of weaknesses, right? Fighting, grass, ice, and water. While Quagsire only has grass. Double weak to grass, but grass. So I think in terms of like bulkiness and coverage moves, G-Fisk, Quagsire, very easy, obvious answers to this as well. which is why I think it's tough to replace Lickitung with Diggersby, because I think they play very, very separate roles. But in terms of XL and Legendary, I think those are the main ones. Tapu Fini, again, a Tapu Fini is a Azumarill, so whatever you're going to replace with the Azumarill with is what I would replace Tapu with. But that is it. We are done with the XL Pokemon. And we're done with the Legendary Pokemon. Can you do Legendary in here? Yep. Registeel, Cress, Regirock. Again, Regirock and Registeel, I would just replace the same, like G-Fisk. Stuff like that. Guzzlord. Guzzlord's kind of... I didn't even touch Guzzlord, because Guzzlord's like non-meta. It's a dark dragon. I would replace it just with... If you're going to use Guzzlord as a dark dragon, I think you probably just, instead of that, you just go like Steelix, right, with the Dragon Tail and Breaking Swipes. Or if you want to go with like... Zweilous. Zweilous is the closest as a dark. Yeah, actually, Zweilous almost plays the exact same role, because it's a dark dragon with like almost the same moveset. Instead of Dragon Tail, it's Dragon Breath. You have Crunch, and then instead of a Dragon Claw, it's Body Slam. So Zweilous is obviously the answer for that. But I do not hate Steelix as sort of a 1B answer there. So that's it. I plan to do a few more videos like this, but the first one is going to be... I'm going to now look at Great League Shadow versus non-Shadow Pokemon, right, to see when it matters versus it doesn't matters. So, for example, Swampert's on this list twice at 5 and 7. That doesn't seem to be substantial. Sableye with the one obvious one, 17 versus 94, and that is mostly because of the second move of Return versus Power Gem. I'm trying to think what other Pokemon had Shadow versions on here. Gligar, right? Gligar is going to be a big one, but it's 6 versus 9. Everyone wants to know the difference there. Quagsire, Poliwrath, yeah. Quagsire, Poliwrath. So they're close, and Poliwrath is not, which I agree with this one because of its moveset and what you do with it. So we're going to go over Shadow versus non-Shadow there, and then we'll do the exact same thing for both these videos for Ultra League. And I think I moved too hard because my video just froze. Anyways, that's it. That's a video. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you have any other thoughts about replacements for Great League XL Pokemon or Legendary Pokemon. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.